Colby Daniels podcast on a Sunday post UFC 264. Will Brewer. I could barely sleep. I woke up this morning. There was zero chance I was going to make it until Thursday of this week to talk about what we witnessed last night with Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. I had to get it out, so we are recording on a Sunday.
Well, I don't think there's any other place I'd rather be on a Sunday, man, because after everything that happened last night, we definitely have to get into it. We have to do a deep dive into it and react to this immediately.
So this morning, Lauren said, "Did you guys have fun?" I was like, "Yeah, we had a great time." Like, it was the card was crazy. She was like, "You guys are so funny. I could just hear you guys oohing and awing and screaming and like all of these reactions to everything that was going on." And I'm sure, like, thinking back on it, if you were not in the room and you were just listening to the two of us react to what we were watching, it probably sounded like complete chaos.
Yeah, I was a little worried because I was like, oh, I hope that we're not waking anybody up or anything. But yeah, the card was absolutely insane. Every single fight had something where you're just like, oh, shit, oh, my God. It was just a crazy night of fights, man.
So the main event begins, the trilogy fight between Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor. Obviously, this time around, there's bad blood. These guys don't like each other. They're not playing nice. It felt like vintage Conor McGregor, although a little bit forced, all week leading up to this fight. As the fight begins, I'm like, I cannot sit down. I've got to stand up and watch this thing. I'm too anxious. I'm feeling, my heart's beating a million miles a minute. So I'm ready for this thing to go down. Will, we witnessed 5 full minutes of everything we were hoping this fight would be. I mean, it was intense action for a full 5 minutes. And then in the final 5 seconds of that first round, obviously a catastrophe for Conor McGregor. That's not the ending that anybody wanted to happen, but we got to talk about what we witnessed in these 5 minutes that actually took place, because what we watched was complete domination from Dustin Poirier. I think a lot of people may get caught up in Conor McGregor being able to kind of lean on the doctor stoppage and the injury, but don't let the injury distract you from the fact that Dustin Poirier was beating that ass.
Yeah, that's a legendary tweet from last night that you put out, man, because, I mean, you couldn't have said it any better. Don't let the injury distract you from the fact that Dustin Poirier was beating that ass. I mean, Conor came out early with the leg kicks. He was looking really good. But Dustin, he stayed composed. It's an MMA fight. And, when Dustin started opening up with his hands, Conor seemed a little, taken aback by it. But let me ask you this. Who was the one who initiated the clinch, the grappling aspect of the game? It was not Dustin Poirier. It was Conor McGregor, because Dustin started piecing him up on the feet.
Absolutely.
And Conor needed to stop it. So he hugged him like, oh, no, we can't have this no more. And then Dustin was like, oh, this is why? Oh, you're going to give me this? So we're going to go to the cage. I mean, Conor did try to pull off a guillotine choke, but Dustin, being the black belt that he is, he knew exactly what to do. He knew where he was in the octagon, took Conor down, and eventually got on top, and then just started raining down elbows and punches. Just it looked, Dustin looked and it was for Conor there for a little bit. Conor was able to survive, and I don't know.
Vicious ground and pound from Dustin Poirier. Look, we're going to talk about what we saw in the first round. We're going to talk about what might have happened if this fight had continued. But, 2 of the 3 judges scored that at 10-8, Will. But I think that's just an example of what people saw when they were watching this fight. Yes, Conor McGregor had success in the first minute of the fight, which is the MO for Conor McGregor, right? He's most dangerous in the first round, but more specifically, most dangerous in about the opening 2 minutes. So if you're fighting Conor McGregor, Will, I'm going to ask you, you're going into the octagon with Conor McGregor. What is your game plan for those first 2 minutes? Is it to attack Conor McGregor? Is it to lead the dance? Or is it to be really smart about what you're doing when he's going to blitz you for those first 2 minutes and then react? Because what makes Conor McGregor elite is those first 2 minutes, the wild attack. It can come from anywhere. It's unorthodox. He kind of overwhelms people. And what usually happens, or at least in the past, what has happened in Conor McGregor's big moments, Somebody makes a mistake early, Conor McGregor capitalizes, and it's a Conor McGregor finish in the first round.
I just think, man, he does really well at kind of lulling people to try to make that mistake. He's in and out. It kind of seems like he's not going to do anything, even though the punch is coming. But he's so in and out, and he kind of just waits for you to make that mistake. Although, what did he do? He rushed in. Eddie Alvarez rushed in, and he's such an accurate counter striker that when someone rushes in, he's like, oh, like, yes, like, this is perfect. So when you wait back, kind of like what Dustin did, and you make Conor lead the dance, it seems like all of his strikes were predictable. So even though they seem predictable, he did do a good job at chopping up the lead leg and everything. I think Dustin kind of knew that it was coming, because when you look at the Nate Diaz rematch, that was something that he looked to, was letting his kicks set up the punch. So he kind of looked for that to happen, but Dustin did a good job of laying back. So if I was in that position, I would definitely do what Dustin did, not force the action and let Conor make the mistake. Let Conor come to me, because Conor will make that mistake like we've seen with Dustin 2 times now.
Yeah, Dustin basically dominated that first round. Conor McGregor had a solid, I don't know what it was, first minute or so approximately of the fight. And the more I think about it, the more it makes sense that he would have. I mean, if you're Dustin Poirier, it doesn't make any sense to force the issue out of the gate. If you're Dustin Poirier, the smart move is to let Conor kind of do his thing in that first minute. Don't make the mistake. And then when you kind of settle in, you feel like you've got his rhythm. He's kind of, started to do his thing. Then you take advantage in whatever way you choose to take advantage. But I give Conor a lot of credit for the attack in the first minute, but the bottom line is, even with that happening, I still kind of feel like that was advantage Poirier, because he didn't fall for it. He didn't fall into Conor's trap. He could have easily tried to respond to a number of those leg kicks with something, and maybe he gets caught, but he didn't. He's an experienced fighter at this stage. He's a veteran that's been in the octagon way more than Conor McGregor, and he wasn't lured into the trap.
Yeah, you got to give Dustin credit, because Conor was making those adjustments as, just kicking that lead leg and everything. But, Dustin did a good job. He didn't overexert himself. Whenever he did try to go and land those combinations, he didn't just try to make it. He didn't go in blind, right? He came in knowing he was still defensively sound, but still was going to land the punches. And those punches was hurting Conor. That's why he clinched him. So Dustin made Conor make that mistake. So Dustin, being the veteran that he is, I mean, all of the champions, the former champions that he's seen in the octagon, it's paid off. Now Dustin's the one who's making his head bounce off the floor and stuff,
Yeah. Paraphrasing, of course, this week, Conor McGregor said something along the lines of, the first guy that attempts a takedown or shoots or anything like that is a bitch, right? Like, he kind of wanted to set it up where the other guy, Dustin, felt pressure to not do that because, people are going to call you a bitch, I guess, if you do. I thought it was super fascinating that as soon as Dustin landed that flurry of 3 or 4 punches, Will, and I watched it again. We watched it back last night, the second time, right after it had finished. I watched it again this morning. Dustin hurt Conor with those punches in that flurry. Conor jumps way back off of one of the punches, and then who initiates the clinch? It's Conor McGregor. It was not Dustin Poirier. So for as many people as there are that are like, Dustin didn't want to stand with him. Well, guess what? Dustin was standing with him. Dustin was winning in the stand-up, and Conor McGregor tried to bail out of the stand-up by clinching Dustin.
I mean, you got to give these Conor McGregor fans, give them some credit, right? Because for that minute, Conor, he had his
back,
moments.
baby. He's back.
He's back, baby. He was chopping up the leg. He had the karate stance and everything. So, and there were people like, I really think he could have won that round. And so then you're like, okay, maybe you didn't watch the whole round and everything, but yeah. Dustin, the game plan, I don't really know what exactly the game plan was, because it really just seemed like Dustin's game plan was just see what Conor was going to do. Conor went out there and chopped the lead leg, which was good, but as soon as Dustin kind of just let himself a little bit loose, Dustin took over that fight. Yeah. And then on the ground, Conor had nothing for Dustin on the ground. I mean, those elbows at first that he was landing from the bottom, those were okay. But then Dustin he decided not to take those anymore. And he started raining down elbows and punches. And this was about 3 minutes of control time on the top for Dustin. And, Conor had no answer. He couldn't get up. And by the time that they did get up, it was Dustin saying, fuck it, your hand is in my glove. I'm just going to let you up now. And then the fight ended the way it did. So,
yeah.
And in those final 5 seconds, the referee could have stopped that fight, but because Dustin was on top of him landing punches, but it went to the end. But the fight could have been stopped in that final 5 seconds for sure.
I also want to go back to a quote that we talked about last Thursday when we recorded leading into this pay-per-view. Conor McGregor last week said something along the lines of his record was 19-1. He doesn't recognize decisions. Get ready for this. He doesn't recognize submissions and tap outs. He only recognizes knockouts. What happened halfway through the first round? This was a game changer in this fight. What happened I think it might have been actually a minute and a half into the fight. He tries for a guillotine. The guy that is literally building up to this fight talking about only wanting knockouts was the one that attempted a submission move. So the fight goes to the ground. Dustin obviously obliges this to go to the ground because Conor decides he wants to try the submission move. And then that's when Dustin really started pouring it on. But to me, that is out of complete desperation for a guy to talk nothing about nothing but knockouts. To try a guillotine a minute and a half into the first round is a desperate move.
Oh, yeah, desperate move, because Dustin was piecing him up on the feet, and it was so quick, and Conor just was like, okay, let me grab you, and then he goes for the submission. So first, you go for the takedown after you said the first person to go for a takedown is a bitch. Then you talk about how submissions don't count, and then you're the person who's trying to get a submission. So it's like, Conor, bro. And then you're the one that said that Dustin was going to leave on a stretcher. Yeah. And you're the one that left on a stretcher. Like, Conor, bro, I know you claim to be Mystic Mac, but I don't know. I think you're starting to lose your powers a little bit, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's. A lot of people have responded to me on Twitter with something along the lines of, we don't know what would have happened if the fight had continued. And look, that's fair. Like, I get that. Like, if none of us can say with absolute certainty what was going to happen the rest of the way. I think you're a fool if you deal in absolutes in pretty much anything. But here's what we know. In the history of Conor McGregor's entire UFC career, and I'm talking about even when he was really active versus not being so active over the last 5 years, Conor McGregor fades. Conor McGregor is as dangerous as anybody in the history of the UFC in the opening minutes of the first round of the fight. But after the first round, Conor McGregor fades drastically. Now, on the other side of that, Dustin Poirier has been through many, wars, 4 5-round wars against the best of the best. In the Shark Tank that is the 155 division in the UFC, Dustin Poirier has fought the best of the best for 4 and 5 rounds. Like, going into the second and third and fourth rounds for Dustin Poirier is not a big deal. In fact, we felt like if this fight went, the further it went, the more advantage it was for Dustin Poirier. So let's just say Conor doesn't break his ankle. If we're sitting there having the conversation when those guys are sitting on the stools getting ready for round 2, what's the conversation? That all of a sudden Conor McGregor, who is completely dominated in his best round, is going to look better in the second round or look better in the third round? He was dominated in his best round by Dustin Poirier, and he fades after round 1. Like, what does common sense tell you was going to happen the rest of the way? What do you think the progression of that fight would have been?
Absolutely, man. Conor does fade after the first round. He's so aggressive, and he throws power shots throughout the entirety of the first round. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when it doesn't work and you go and you take him into the second and third and the fourth round, he tends to fade because you can't throw power shots for 25 minutes. Like, that style it just doesn't add up. It doesn't work. So in his past fights, we've seen him hands on his hips, walking around the cage like, man, like gassed out.
He was gassed
Dustin,
out
on
after the
other
ground
hand,
and pound.
Exactly, he was gassed out. And so Dustin, on the other hand, we've seen him after the first round. He may even lose the first round, but it's competitive a lot of the times. But a lot of times he'll lose. Against Gaethje, he was losing. Against Dan Hooker, he was losing.
Yeah.
But as the rounds go on, 2, 3, 4, 5, Dustin just gets better. So we can't just think like, okay, if Conor wouldn't have broke his ankle, he would have won. Okay, you can't say that, because in the second round, who's to say Dustin doesn't just, that the fight standing up just completely doesn't turn around, because Conor's tired. Dustin starts to chop his legs. Dustin starts to grapple him even more, because now Conor has to worry about the takedowns even more. He has to worry about his hands because he just got hurt. So he has to worry about the kicks because that was what affected him last time. So he has to worry about so many things of MMA. So, and then Conor's not going to be as aggressive as he was in the first round. So, I mean, history tells us, I mean, of course, we don't know. It's an MMA fight. Anything can happen. But history tells us that Conor fades after the first round and Dustin just continues to improve after the first round.
Dustin gets better after round one. Conor fades after round one. Dustin dominated Conor in round one. Conor McGregor looked absolutely gassed as the fight was being stood back up in those final 10 seconds or whatever it was in that first round. I think it's preposterous for anyone to reasonably say the expectation would have been that Conor McGregor wins that fight. Now, again, it's the fight game. Conor McGregor has heavy hands. Conor McGregor's capable of knocking out anybody he's in the octagon against. So, I give him a lot of credit in that regard. But, again, common sense and everything we've ever watched from both of these guys says that fight was only going to get worse for Conor McGregor based on everything we had seen in those opening 5 minutes. I thought that when it was all over and I really continued to digest everything we watched last night, Will, like, that was a masterful performance from Dustin Poirier.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about Dustin Poirier now, like we talked about how underappreciated he is, I think we really need to start realizing how much of a championship level competitor that he is, that he has been for years, and now we go into this fight with such a big superstar, and people are, Conor's back, he's gonna do this, but Dustin being the championship level fighter that he is, that doesn't rattle him. He's gonna keep doing his same game plan. He's gonna keep being the same fighter that he is. He's good everywhere. He can take this fight so many different ways. Like I said on the last show, like, he can make this a mauling and be a Khabib type guy, or he can go and just be kick heavy. He can go and be boxing heavy. Like, he can be elite in all of these areas. A masterful performance from Dustin Poirier. It just goes to show that he's at the lightweight division. He's at the top of the division, because not a lot of guys can stand with Conor McGregor. Let's give him credit where credit's due. Conor McGregor, he's heavy-handed. Not many people want to see that left hand, but Dustin Poirier did it 2 fights in a row and hurt Conor McGregor on the feet, and took Conor to places that he didn't want to go. Masterful performance from Dustin, and he's so deserving of this title shot. He didn't even have to take this fight, but he took it anyway. He bet on himself, doubled down, and now he's going to fight for the title.
Yeah. I'm going to defend Conor here for a second. And maybe this will be a backhanded compliment to some degree, but I think it's extremely fair. I've heard a lot. I mean, everybody has a hot take on Conor McGregor right now. And the common one I saw last night on my Twitter timeline is Conor doesn't have it anymore. Conor is no longer what he used to be. And I actually disagree with that. Like, heels in the ground disagree with that. I think the problem is Conor McGregor is exactly who he's always been. That's the biggest issue.
Right.
He's the exact same guy that he was 5 years ago. That's the problem. Dustin Poirier is not the guy that Conor knocked out. How long ago was it now? 5 or 6 years? Whatever it's been. I forget the timeline.
Maybe 7.
Maybe longer. Dustin Poirier, I mean, I think you said this last night. To look at that guy and say that's Dustin Poirier is mind-blowing, because he doesn't even look like the same guy, much less fight like the same guy. He carries himself in a completely different way. Conor McGregor's exactly the same fighter. He's still a guy that's going to come at you as soon as the fight starts. He's going to blitz you. He's going to try to overwhelm you. He's going to hope you make a mistake. And then once again, giving Conor all the credit in the world, if you make that mistake, he's so heavy-handed, he will knock you out. His game hasn't evolved at all. And that's the biggest issue. When you look at Conor McGregor's success, and you know, the majority of it came at 145 anyway. He's now 1-3 at 155, but he's not added anything to the arsenal. Everybody knows exactly what Conor's going to do. And the guys he's going to be facing now, Dustin Poirier, and if you want to throw anybody else in the top 5 at 155 in this conversation, I think it's fair. Those guys' games are all so much more well-rounded than Conor McGregor's. I think you're talking about the same outcome, no matter what name you want to throw into the equation if they're facing Conor McGregor. It's 100% to me about the evolution of the sport and how all of these peers of Conor McGregor's have gotten so much better, and he's stayed in the same spot. He's not been training MMA consistently around the clock for the last 5 years. Thus, he is still dangerous. He is still a guy that can knock you out, but he doesn't have a lot in the tool belt. He's still the same guy. So is Conor McGregor done? Absolutely not. Conor McGregor's still a threat to anybody that is on the other side of him when a fight starts. But if Conor McGregor doesn't knock you out, and probably if he doesn't knock you out early, everybody in that division that is a killer is going to have a lot more to reach into and use against Conor McGregor than he is against them.
Absolutely. I've always asked this question about Conor McGregor, like what happens after you throw your best shots at people and they don't fall? Like with Nate Diaz, like in the first fight, he threw his best shots at Nate Diaz for 2 rounds, and Nate Diaz, his face was battered, but Nate Diaz was still there. Yeah. And then eventually Nate Diaz got him out of there. It's just it's the same thing that it's been for the past 5-6 years. I mean, he's fought guys who just can't take the power, but when he does fight the guys who can take the power and he has to reach into his tool belt, there's not much there for him to get to. While these other guys with Dustin Poirier, he's a guy that has a deep bag of tricks and of game that he can just throw at Conor McGregor, and Conor McGregor's not going to be able to do anything about it because, I mean, he's got a nasty left hand, but outside of that, what do we know about Conor McGregor? I mean, he's got good kicks, he's got a good stance, He's a great counter striker, but outside of that, when Conor leads the dance, he's valuable to make a mistake. And we've seen that with Dustin. And now this division is so loaded with killers with Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira, the champion, Dos Santos is back. Like, where is the matchup that you look at it and you're like, okay, that's the match where Conor McGregor is going to come back and show everybody that he's still that guy. Yeah. I mean, you really can't. I mean, this division is so loaded. So now it's starting to become a case where we're starting to look at it where that Conor McGregor is a big superstar, but he's not the best fighter in the UFC or the best fighter in the division. We just have to call it what it's worth. I mean, Conor's a good superstar, a great superstar. I'll watch him again. I mean, I said after the last fight, I'm like, man, I don't even care if Conor McGregor comes back. But I lied because I was so hyped for this fight. Just that Conor McGregor factor, it's always going to be there. So he's a superstar, but I mean, he's not the best guy in the division. He's not the best guy in the UFC. And
the problem is,
to separate that now.
I think he's still a top 15 guy. I just don't think he's elite. And look, we're talking about the best division in the sport. But, I mean, when you think about what Conor versus Oliveira would look like, when you think about what Conor versus Gaethje or Dariush or Chandler or Makhachev would look like, all of those guys, I think, do exactly what Dustin did. I don't think any of those guys are going to try and force the issue in the first couple minutes. I think all of those guys have good enough chins that if he does land something, maybe they go out, but I think that they could survive potentially, and all of those guys can do so many more things than Conor McGregor and do so many more things way better than Conor McGregor. Right. The bottom line is he's just not elite. Now you start looking at some guys further down that list, and maybe that's where Conor McGregor lives now, again, simply because his skills haven't evolved with the rest of the guys at 155, or at least the guys at the top. So I'm actually, if Conor McGregor is able to come back, which, I mean, Good Lord, Will. I don't even know what the timeline for a break like that would be. I can't imagine it's within the next year. But we'll see. If he's really dedicated, maybe he gets back quicker than any of us expect. But first of all, just to get to the point that you can fight again, much less beginning training and going through everything that it takes to get back into the octagon, I think we're looking at a long layoff for a guy that's already had long layoffs. So we're probably not talking about him adding more skills the next time that he's able to get into the octagon. But again, the power's there. If you give him the right opponent, if you give him a guy that's not a big threat to maybe grapple with him or take him to the ground and jiu-jitsu, or, if it's just a striker at 155, then, maybe that's the path to get Conor McGregor back. But if you're giving him some of the well-rounded fighters in the top 15 at that weight class, I just don't see where it works. And again, we're talking about a big if regarding Conor McGregor coming back and being the same guy that he is now, much less adding to the arsenal. Because I think the one thing about Conor that always sticks out, he's so fast, he's so quick. Those spinning kicks out of the gate last night, like, it's impressive to watch the blitz that he puts on you because, the athletic gifts are there without a doubt. If that part of it is able to come back when he does come back, maybe we're talking about him still being able to perform at a high level. I just don't think he's performing at the highest level, especially at 155.
Yeah, we're starting to separate him being a superstar from him being the best in the world. So as a promoter, like, what do you do with him now? Do you still give him the best of the best? Because that's what Conor McGregor's superstardom has called for. You have to fight the best of the best. But against the best of the best, he's 1-3, right?
Yeah.
So now you don't give him the best of the best anymore. You have to give him favorable matchups because people are going to pay to see him, but you have to give him favorable matchups. So do you go down the rankings? I mean, a lot of these guys don't have the type of name to go in there with Conor McGregor, which is a problem because then when you think about the guys with the names, these are the guys who are the best of the best.
Yeah.
So now it's just like, who do you throw him in there with? You have to throw him in there with the guy who's just looking to strike. I mean, you've got people like Nate Diaz who still has a name, who will just be a boxing type guy. You got the Nate Diaz trilogy. But outside of that, I mean, there's not many guys. This sport is so crazy. Everyone is so good nowadays. Like, I mean, maybe there's Max Holloway. I mean, maybe you look to do that, but there's not many guys out there that just are just really favorable matchups to where it's just going to be a stand-up war. I mean, all these guys are so well-rounded nowadays.
I was just going through the list of 155ers in my head thinking, like, what would be beneficial, and a couple names came to mind, which I'll share with you in a second, but I ended up landing on this idea, like, who's a striker at 145 that would make sense? Like, if Conor can cut, well, that's where the guy was successful. Like, there's this idea, I think, that who he was at one weight class is who he's going to be in another weight class. And look, we've seen that's absolutely not the case. We've seen some guys have terrible success and move up, and all of a sudden they're like a completely different person. Or the other way around. They're fighting in a class that's too big for them and move down. Maybe 155 just isn't where it's at for Conor McGregor. Maybe it's 145, so maybe it is a Max Holloway. Maybe it is that's a stacked division as well, 145. So maybe there's a striker at 145 that makes sense for Conor, and that's how you get him back on track. I don't know what the future looks like for Tony Ferguson, especially, if we're talking about a timeline being a year plus. But who wouldn't want to see a Tony Ferguson-Conor McGregor fight, especially with both of them being on the backside of their careers and certainly not at their peak? RDA, I think, would be an interesting fight. I don't know how much we know about RDA right now at 155. We've seen him come back to this division. He's fought one time. It was Paul Felder. It was a good fight. I don't know that I saw something that says I think RDA's in that same group with the guys in the top 5 or 6 of that division. Maybe that's an interesting one. RDA's still a guy that's pretty well-rounded, so that could also be a problem, but he's certainly not athletically at his peak now either. You start looking down the list. I mean, we just saw Brad Riddell in a really awesome fight against Drew Dober. Maybe that's a name. You have to be careful with which names you throw out, because you get a guy that's a takedown artist or a guy that's going to just grapple you, and it just doesn't feel like that's what you want to give Conor. So, Rafael Fiziev, it's an interesting name that brings some power to the table and likes to exchange. Maybe that's where you go. Yeah, you're right. I mean, as far as it being Conor McGregor, it's an interesting spot because you do feel like the name has to have some weight, because it's Conor McGregor. Like, whoever it is, that name has to at least have some weight to it. So it's an interesting dynamic without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, of course, us being hardcore fans, when we think of a Conor McGregor and a Brad Riddell, we're like, "Oh, that's a good matchup." But then, to the national, worldwide media and everyone, they'll be like, "Who the hell is Brad Riddell?"
Riddell?
Exactly. So, who do you give him that has a big enough name who will give him the fight that he wants? And there's just not many names out there. And then if you just want to throw him to the best guys, I mean, 9 times out of 10, those are really, really bad matchups for Conor McGregor. So you can throw him in there with Poirier again. I mean, because there's a story there. The McGregor fans will say, this fight didn't give us any closure. So you can put him in there again. If Charles Oliveira is champion for a while and Conor McGregor is able to get a win or something, you can throw Conor McGregor in there with him for the title. I mean, I don't know, man. It's really tough to really just feel who you give Conor. It's a really really interesting question, but I think Dana, he's going to give him either Poirier or Diaz. I think that's where he goes from here.
I think Diaz is the fight to make. There's no way it's going to be Poirier immediately, especially if Poirier beats Oliveira for the belt. There's no way Conor's getting a title shot straight away. So Diaz makes a ton of sense. You mentioned Max. That, again, depending what happens at 145 with the belt, Max would have the opportunity to avenge a previous loss against Conor McGregor. It would probably be the biggest payday Max has ever had. Everybody would love to see Conor McGregor and Max Holloway in the octagon, regardless of where Conor's at in his career. And, I mean, I don't really see a downside there. It's a striker, so it would be the kind of fight that everybody wants to see out of the two guys. That, to me, would make a ton of sense. Again, timing is going to be everything, and how fast can this guy get healthy and be ready to fight again, because we could be talking about Max Holloway as the 145 champ a year from today. We could also be talking about Dustin Poirier being the 155 champ a year from today. And Dustin was even asked last night in his post-fight press conference, if he has the title, does Conor need to do some work before he gets a title shot? And Dustin, basically laughed like it was the dumbest question he had ever been heard. He's like, the guy's 1-3 or 1-4 in the division. Yeah, he has to do some work before he gets a title shot. But Dustin also recognized the guy's a big enough superstar that if he's able to go out and start somebody, he's right back in the conversation. But I don't think there's any way on planet Earth Conor McGregor comes back from an injury and straight away gets a title shot. That would be mind-blowing. There's no way they would do that.
I mean, I would hope that there's no way that they do that. He like you said, he's 1-3, and there's so many killers at 155.
Right.
There's no way that Conor could put himself in a position to be the number one contender with so many killers in that division without winning a fight. I mean, but we will say, with how big of a superstar that Conor is, all he needs is one win, and then he's right back in there.
Yeah.
So Conor definitely has to get a win. He can't just come off of 2 losses and expect a title shot coming back. So
3 straight losses at 155, by the way. He's on a 3-fight losing streak at 155.
At 155.
Yeah.
And I want to say this about Max, though. I mean, Max would definitely give Conor the fight that he wants. And, when Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor moved up to 155, well, not really Conor McGregor. When Dustin moved up, he had a chance to really play with 155 and get his body to mature in that division. When Max moved up to 155, he went right to the shark. He went right to the best guy, which was Dustin.
Right.
I think if you give Max a fight, maybe like a Conor McGregor, where you're not fighting the best of the best, but you're still fighting a very respectable guy, let Max move up, maybe really add some muscle and stuff. I think Max could potentially really make a run at the title. Seeing Max 155 would be great. I mean, he makes 145 with no problem. But seeing Max 155 with those killers, with how he's been looking lately, it would be tremendous. So that's one thing to look at. But, yeah, man, Conor's definitely going to have to do some work before getting a title shot.
What is your appetite for Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, Part 4?
Me personally, I mean, I would watch it. But I mean, my appetite, I'm like, if I don't see that fight again, it's not good. I'm not going to lose any sleep. I would love to see the antics and everything in the fight leading up to it, or in the pressers and all that leading up to it. But the fight itself, I feel like 9 times out of 10, it goes Dustin's way, and it goes to the guy with the bigger bag. Conor. Maybe that one time that Conor got Dustin was that one time that he'll beat Dustin. But I think it's going to go the same.
Yeah.
So,
I have a hard time seeing Conor McGregor beat this Dustin Poirier. I will say I want to see it. I'm in for a Part 4 to this thing. Dustin was asked about if these guys are going to fight last night, and his response was, we're either going to fight in the octagon or we're going to fight on the sidewalk, but it's going to happen at some point. My thing is, I don't want to see it a year from now. I don't necessarily want to see it. It's always going to be there. I don't think you have to rush to make the fight happen. And the biggest issue is, once again, these guys' careers are going in completely opposite directions. Conor McGregor's lost 3 in a row in this weight division, and he's about to be off for an extended period of time just to get healthy enough to fight again. While Dustin Poirier is going to have a title shot probably around the end of the year or the first of next year. So, do I want to see the 4th fight over the career trajectory of Dustin Poirier? Absolutely not. I'd much rather see Poirier go fight Oliveira and then fight Gaethje again potentially, or fight Michael Chandler, or this division is too good to prevent some of these top tier guys from fighting each other for the sake of another McGregor fight. So I do want to see it, but I think it can wait. I think it can happen maybe a couple years down the road when some of the dust has settled between Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler. Let's throw Dariush in the conversation now. Justin Gaethje, who hasn't fought in about a year now. Islam Makhachev, who might be a champion by that time anyway, who is extremely dangerous, and we'll get to watch next week. But yeah, I'm all in on the 4th fight. I just don't want it getting in the way of progress as far as those elite fighters at 155.
Yeah, Dustin probably needed Conor McGregor to get the rub off of him, to get all the extra fans and the extra eyeballs and stuff. But now Dustin doesn't need him anymore. They fought 3 times. Dustin got the better of it twice. I mean, despite what the popular opinion is, Dustin won 2 out of 3 fights with Conor McGregor. Dustin has gotten 2 big paydays off of fighting Conor McGregor. He doesn't need to fight him anymore. Now for Dustin, it's time for him to go fight for the title and then fight these contenders, because this division is so stacked. Let's not forget that the title is the most important thing. A Conor McGregor fight is not the most important thing. The most important thing is fighting for the title. And Dustin, being the provider for his family that he is, he saw the opportunity to add to his bank account and all that stuff, which is great. But now it's time for Dustin Poirier to fight for the title, to realize his dream if he can do it. He fought Khabib, didn't go his way. This matchup with Charles Oliveira, it's very interesting. And then, like you said, so many guys down the line, like Justin Gaethje, who has gotten better since he fought Dustin Poirier. He lost to Khabib, but Justin Gaethje could easily be the 2nd best or 3rd best lightweight in the world. Yeah. A fight with Dustin Poirier, a rematch with Dustin Poirier, could go easily in Justin Gaethje's way. Michael Chandler, he just fought for the title, but he's still there. Dariush has looked great. Dos Santos is still there. Like, there's so many guys. Like, we have to keep this division moving.
Right.
Conor McGregor, he's great and everything, but this division has got to keep moving. There's so many guys at 155 who want that title.
Yeah, you said this on last week's podcast. I agree with it. Dustin Poirier right now is the best 155 fighter in the world, in my opinion. And that's because Khabib obviously is retired. But I think it's Dustin. But I will say, I don't think the gap from Dustin to the next, like, 5 guys is extreme, right? There are weight divisions where it's like the champion, and then way down, it's everybody else. I do think Dustin's the best, but the gap from him to Oliveira and Chandler and Gaethje and Dariush, and God forbid any of those guys face Islam, it's a small gap. And to say that any one of those guys couldn't be champions, crazy. Any one of those guys is good enough against any of the others to win on any given night and have that belt strapped around them.
Right. It's not like Khabib, because when we looked at Khabib, we knew, like, nobody was touching him.
Right.
I mean, a fight with Oliveira would have been interesting, but we know, like, Khabib probably would have found a way to really maul him. He mauls everybody. If you do the things that you did to Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje, I mean, you know that there's a gap when you do that to those guys. And now that Khabib's gone, now that all these guys are just, like, right there. Like you said, Dustin's probably the best of the pack, but the gap between him to Gaethje and to Oliveira and all these guys, it's slim if there's any at all.
Sure.
So these fights moving forward are going to be super intriguing. The matchups are going to be interesting. When we talk about them, we're gonna say, like, man, either guy could win this fight.
Yeah.
I mean, the odds are going to be really razor thin on all of these guys. We pick them fights a lot of the time. So, man, 155. We're really going to see now how good of a division that it is.
Yeah.
Or people are going to see how great of a division that it is.
As we wrap this up, Conor McGregor, 3-fight losing streak at 155. He's now 1-3 overall at 155. The guy's now 3-4 in his last 7 UFC fights. So he has a losing record in his last 7 UFC fights. I don't think he's lost it. Like I said earlier, I think it's just a matter of he's still the same guy he always was. Everybody else has just evolved with the sport and added so much more to the arsenal than Conor McGregor has. He was completely dominated. Brilliant fight from Poirier. Patient out of the gate. Didn't fall into the trap of making the mistake early when Conor blitzes you. And then he won the stand-up, forced Conor into the clinch. Conor talks about knockouts and goes for the submission out of desperation. Ground and pound for Dustin Poirier, and he was just once again clearly the much better fighter.
Yeah, hats off to Dustin Poirier. He just went out there and proved that he was the best in the world at 155. He didn't fight for the title, which was why we have a champion that's not named Dustin Poirier. But he had to finish this with Conor McGregor. A lot of people will say that it's not finished, but for the time being, with Conor McGregor's injury, it's over for now. Dustin Poirier is going to move on, fight for the title, and Conor McGregor. We talk about him, the superstar that he is. You just wish that he does get healthy, get back to being in the octagon. Nobody wants to see an injury like that.
Right.
Despite how he handled it with the trash talk and everything, you still want to see him recover and get back in the octagon as soon as possible. But hats off to Dustin Poirier, masterful performance, and I'll look forward to seeing him fight for the title.
Yeah, the sport's definitely better with Conor McGregor in it, and I will say I was amused by the fact that he's sitting there talking all this trash after the fight was over, like saying, "I'll kill you, I'll kill you," like. You literally just... I love this. Like, this is one of my favorite things about MMA. You have this guy that's talking trash going into a fight, and he's like, I'm going to kill this guy. I'm going to kill this guy. And then after the fight, he's like, I'm going to kill this guy. I'm going to kill this guy. And then you look at what happened while they actually fought, and nowhere in the entire fight did it look like he was killing the guy. Like, so before you were going to kill him, after you're going to kill him, but the fight looks completely different than anything you've said. So you had your chance. Why didn't you kill him? Like it.
Right. Why did you kill him? You had the chance.
Yeah.
Oh, now that I lost, I'm really gonna kill him.
yeah.
Now you thought I was gonna kill him before.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm really gonna kill him.
Now that I got my ass kicked, now I'm really gonna kill him.
Now I'm really upset that you whooped my ass. Now I'm really mad.
Yeah. Fourth time's a charm, Will. Fourth time's a charm. Poirier McGregor. It's gonna happen. But yeah. Hopefully, like 2 or 3 years from now, when it's not getting in the way of progress at 155.
But I really think that Conor McGregor is not going to want anything else. I think in a year's time, he's going to be begging for that fight when he's healthy. Yeah. And especially if Poirier is not the champion, he'll definitely get that. But I think he'll use his star energy because Dana loves that stuff. He loves being able to sell a Conor McGregor pay-per-view. Conor McGregor is definitely going to try his hardest to get this fight with Dustin as soon as he gets back. So that's my opinion.
If Dustin's the champion, my prediction is the trilogy fight with Nate is next. Book it.
That's what he needs at this stage of his career.
Yeah.
Nate's going to give him the fight that he wants, and that's still a big
massive fight,
big pay-per-view. So
I mean, look,
make that happen, Conor.
If those two guys were fighting next Saturday night, that might sell more than any other UFC fight in history sold. If that fight were happening next Saturday night, right? Like,
absolutely, for sure.
I know it can happen anytime, but we're talking about a long timeline for Conor to get back anyway. Why mess with it any further? Like, both guys right now are massive draws.
They're massive draws. It doesn't hold up any division because Nate Diaz isn't tied to really any division. It doesn't hold up anything. So at this point in their careers, I think they don't really need each other, but I think at this point we're starting to circle back. You know, they went away for a long time from each other. They separated, and now this time they're kind of circling back to where it's just like the perfect time to finally meet. So why not? Go ahead and get this one done.
We will talk about the rest of the fight card on Thursday. We'll revisit this as well and then make our predictions for next week's fight card on Thursday. But there was no way I was going to be able to sleep 4 or 5 more times before we had this conversation about Poirier and McGregor. So always fun, my friend. I'm glad you were able to make it for the fights last night, and always good to catch up again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Those bacon wrap jalapenos were legendary. Can't wait to do it again, my brother.
The podcast is over.